Hello, everybody. Welcome into another YouTube live show. I am John Kurtz. My apologies running a tad bit late here today. Believe it or not, I was all set to be on time for the fairly regular 8:15 kickoff here, and I got stuck behind a train. All right, got stuck behind a train on my way back home. So, been a while since that has happened, but I digress. I'm here. We're ready to roll. We're gonna talk. We're gonna talk some realignment. We're gonna talk some Big 12 football. We do have. I would call it a bit of an update on Clemson, Florida State. Just more smoke that has come out, this time courtesy of the SB Nation Florida State site. So say what you will about the credibility of that site, but it has done a good job of compiling some different reports on Clemson and Florida State and what may or may not be happening as far as that goes. We will definitely talk about that. But the main focus today is going to be around something that I've got to give a shout out to my guy, Robbie Triano, who used to work on Big 12 radio, for putting this question in my mind. And then I'll give a shout out to my guy, Josh Neighbors, who I know a lot of you guys watch on the 365 channel, because he had me on yesterday and we were talking about this. We just kind of got into a conversation about the prompt that Robbie had put out there. And I was like, that's actually a really good discussion point here about where this league is at on the heels of Texas and Oklahoma playing this weekend. So the question basically was framed as, how bad would it be for the Big 12? How damaging would it be for the Big 12 if Texas and Oklahoma are who is going to play for the Big 12 championship? And particularly if then, Texas wins the league on its way out the door. And I thought, obviously it's not something that any of us, well, most of us, maybe there's some Texas and OU fans here. There are not many of us that would be here in this channel, in this chat, that would be pulling for that, rooting for that, anything of that nature, right? This is not a very pro-Texas and Oklahoma place. But beyond that, I hadn't thought of the full implications of it. And I think this is the perfect time to talk about it, not just because Texas and Oklahoma are playing this weekend, but also because Texas, with the win last week and with Georgia struggling a little bit, Michigan having not played anybody, it's kind of brought in this discussion. I'm like, hey, is Texas actually the best team in the country? Which I think is a fair discussion to have here at this point. So it's this realization of oh, this is probably going to happen, isn't it? Texas is going to be in this Big 12 championship game, and Oklahoma still has such a manageable schedule after this game. Very good chance that this happens. So how much damage reputationally will this do to the Big 12 if that is the scenario that plays out? I want to dive all the way into that discussion, because this is actually one of those times. I try to be as positive as I can about the league. I try to be an advocate for the league, but I've got to just be honest that I don't think it would be a very good thing at all for the Big 12's reputation, based on what college football is today and how narrative-based it is, and frankly, how stupid some of it is, and how we've abandoned some things that are really for the good of the game. So I want to dive all the way into that. We've got some Pac-12 updates too. Didn't get to those last time on the last live show from John Wilner. So there's that. And then obviously we can talk about what's going on the field. I did enjoy whoever put it in the chat a second ago that said the guarantee, since he won't lose this weekend. I would make that guarantee as well. Hey, that should have been my clickbait headline for the video today. Cincinnati will not lose this weekend. I guarantee it. Cincinnati is not playing. You only have one of the newcomers in action this weekend. That's UCF at Kansas at 3:00 on Fox. K-State and Oklahoma State kicks off your weekend on Friday night. Then, of course, we have Red River at 11 on ABC. Then at 7:00, two games going on. You've got Texas Tech and Baylor in Waco, which is an incredibly intriguing game. And then TCU at Iowa State. Man, they're being put on FS2. FS2. That game's going to do numbers, folks, on FS2. That game will do numbers. But anyway, that's what's on the docket tonight. Here for that chat. And I'm here for whatever thoughts you have. And with almost 100 people in the chat already, I won't be able to keep up with everything that's going on there. So if you want to be a part of the show tonight, click the $ below the chat box. That is how you can attach a donation to your chat. Make it a super chat. It will pin it in a separate column for me. And that ensures that your question or comment makes it on the show tonight. So not only is it a way to let your voice be heard and share your question or comment, but it's also a great way just to support the work that I'm doing here on this channel to bring you college football, college basketball, and conference realignment content, all from a Big 12 slant. That is the purpose, the idea here of this channel. If you are new here, you haven't subscribed, would much appreciate you doing that as well. There's a live show on Wednesday. There's a live show on Saturday. And then content sprinkled in between as well. So if you want to like the video, that is another very free, very easy way to support the channel. All of that stuff really helps as well. If you are not watching this live and you'd like to contribute and support the channel, you can do that on Venmo. It is John-Kurtz-4 in order to do that. So plenty of ways to get in touch, plenty of ways to help out the channel here tonight. I believe that is all I have as far as housekeeping goes. So again, click the $sign below the chat box if you want to be a part and get your question or comment in there. But let's start with this. How damaging would a Texas title be for the Big 12? And not just a Texas title, but if it goes down the way that it looks right now, which would be a Texas-Oklahoma Big 12 championship game rematch, and presumably Texas winning the championship if we're going to play this all out by favorites. Maybe we'll feel drastically different about it this weekend if Oklahoma goes out there and handles Texas, but I would presume Texas to be a strong favorite, in my eyes anyway, in this game. They are much more battle-tested to this point in the year. Man, I struggle with this. Like, I started talking to Josh about it last night, and I was like, man, this just does not lead me to a good place about where all this is going. If you are, I'm going to forget the exact percentages here, and it's my fault. I should have pinned the tweet and made sure to bring it up here. But there was a tweet from, I believe it was like ESPN's FPI, likelihood of winning a conference championship. And I mean, it's Texas and Oklahoma, and then pretty big drop off to K-State. And then I think West Virginia had like an 11% chance. And after that, nobody had more than a 1% chance to win this thing, right? So, like, guys, it's not looking good right now if you're hoping for anything other than Texas, Oklahoma after back-to-back years here where you've had 4 completely new schools playing for the conference championship. And out of the last 3 years, Oklahoma's made 1 appearance, Texas 0. You've had 5 of the 6 participants in this being different schools and schools that were not Texas and OU. So it would not be good. It would not be a good thing if that's the way all of this plays out, even though we all know here well on this channel that Texas hasn't peed a drop in 14 years. Texas has not won the Big 12 championship in 14 years. It's a decade and a half of wandering through the desert of irrelevancy, but they will get the benefit of the doubt. And college football is so soaked in narratives now and just all about narratives all the time that unfortunately the reality is the narrative will be, as Texas and Oklahoma are on their way out the door, hey, look, these guys dominated the conference the entire time they were there. The Big 12 is now in a lot of trouble as they exit. And it would have been different had this been at the end of last year. You know, in hindsight, it's almost like, God, could they have figured something out to get those guys out by the end of last year? So that could have been the lasting narrative. TCU winning a game in the college football playoff, becoming the only team in the Big 12, in the Big 12 era, to win a game in the college football playoff. That would have been better. Texas with an 8-5 season, not playing for the Big 12 championship. K-State and TCU being the 2 that do. Having 2 teams, one that plays in the Sugar Bowl, wins the Big 12 championship, another that wins a college football playoff game. Both going on to do bigger and better things than Texas and OU last year. It would have been phenomenal. It would have been fantastic. And we live in this short attention span, narrative-fueled society these days. That narrative plays a lot better than it does. Well, actually, this year, Texas is going to throw out its best team post-Colt McCoy. That's not great. I think you need to look no further than what has been happening on College Game Day to realize just how narrative-driven everything in this sport is now, to a disappointing degree. Like, one of the great traditions in college football for a long time has been not only College Game Day, but within the College Game Day ecosphere, it's been that Washington State flag. And you've got Pat McAfee, one of the hosts on there, Carnival Barker, just going out now and crapping all over the idea of that and what Washington State fans did for years and years to get that flag on game day. And that is one of the great little idiosyncrasies of college football that is fantastic and makes the sport great. And now what we're doing is with the premier show about college football that used to be a celebration of the sport. It's on a network that has helped tear down the fabric of the sport, destroy a conference. And now one of the two schools that's being completely screwed from that, we're just going to pee all over their grave with Pat McAfee running out there because he's a little bit offended that Washington State would dare be offended by ESPN taking a total cheap shot at them on the show. I mean, whether Lee Corso said it, a producer I'm sure wrote it, it was a cheap shot. And so, of course, they're a little bit upset with it. I haven't had time to dive into all that, but Pat McAfee, I've said this, but I don't remember who did I tell to suck it one time. Pat McAfee can suck it, man. It's terrible. It's been a horrible look for him, just a garbage look for him and a garbage look for the sport. I bring that up in the Texas conversation to show just how much like everything is just about these narratives and brands now. Who cares? ESPN at this point, College Game Day didn't care to go desecrate one of the great traditions in the sport and within their own damn show, because all that matters now is just having McAfee out there to bark all over the place and get a bunch of clicks and be like people talking about it. And who cares? Like Washington State can be collateral damage now. The rest of the Big 12 is obviously much more like Washington State than they are Texas or Oklahoma here. So if Texas and Oklahoma are going to play for this thing and it's going to be Texas that walks away winning it, that will erase 14 years of thumping around at 7-5, farting around in this league as a 7-5 program for 15 years. It will not matter if this goes the way that it goes here at the end of the year. People will think Texas dominated. They'll remember, well, Vince Young, that happened at one point, and then Oklahoma took over and started running the thing. And then, there at the end, Texas had a great team too. So, both of those teams just ran the league. Even though, Baylor, K-State, 3 Big 12 titles. Like, there have been other schools that have been more productive. TCU, even with all the high-level success that they have had, more productive than Texas the last 15 years. Won't matter. You won't get the benefit of the doubt for that. That's not how people will remember the narrative. They're also then, this gets especially worse, I think, if Texas does what it really kind of looks like they're probably going to do now and becomes more and more successful in the SEC, ups their level as they go to the new conference and they're in the SEC and continues to recruit at a high level. I think they've done a phenomenal job getting their lines in order. And if they continue to do that in the SEC and play well, that will just continue to carry that narrative and it will leave the Big 12 further and further behind and in the dust. So, look, the league has done a tremendous job at reversing a narrative that was completely down in the dumps. What we're talking about here with the Big 12 is still not as bad as it was before, like when it was, you still have residual effects of Dan Beebe and all these different schools jumping ship and the position that you were in July 2021, right? You've come a long way since then, and I don't think you would be kicked down to where it was at its lowest point and at its worst point before that. I can assure you of that. It would not be that bad. But still, as much work as it has taken, like 2 full years of making major moves, adding the 4 schools that are now in the league, hiring Brett Yormark stealing the 4 corner schools, Yormark taking the Big 12 to Mexico, all of these different innovative things. And not just innovative, but incredibly impactful things that have been more impactful than anything that's happened in the history of the league before. 2 years worth of that, a good chunk of that can be wiped away pretty quick by the way that this league is going. And I should mention too, it is not just about the fact that it would be Texas and Oklahoma playing well and performing well this year. It's that the rest of the league has dropped the ball. And, that is something that we need to be honest about too. The rest of the league has really kind of dropped the ball this year in terms of what needed to be done to prevent this from happening. Not just Texas and Oklahoma getting there, but also just making the league look better. The list of bad losses for everybody in this league is pretty wretched. And there's hardly a team that can say that they're not guilty of this in some part. South Alabama beat Oklahoma State by 26. 2 years ago, they won the Fiesta Bowl. They beat Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl. This year, they're losing by 26 at home to South Alabama. Cincinnati comes into the league and loses at home to Miami, Ohio. Texas State waltzes in and beats Baylor. your Big 12 champion from 2 years ago. It's been brutal. TCU not only loses to Colorado, then loses at home to West Virginia. To build off of what they did last year, they're doing the exact opposite of it. It's been kind of one of those what can go wrong will go wrong years for what the league is comprised of right now. Now they're going to get a boost, and I've seen some of you pointing out in the chat like, hey, Colorado is going to help. And yes, if Coach Prime and Dion get here next year, it will help a ton in terms of visibility. But I do think that's a pretty big if as to whether or not he's actually going to be there. But that will help, and that will help draw some attention. You do have guys like Gus Johnson out there on the call this past weekend saying that Colorado would be the favorite in the Big 12 next year, which I think is pretty ridiculous. But that will give you some cachet. It will certainly help if that is the case. And that's a part of why, the Four Corners was a very, very important move. Utah is very respected. That will definitely help your football cachet right away. But it still would have behooved the Big 12 to have one of the years, either of the last 2 years would have been great to have the way everybody performed there. But instead, we've had this year. Texas Tech, I love Joey McGuire. I love a lot of what I feel like is going on at Texas Tech, but Joey McGuire talked a big game this offseason, and then he went out and lost to Wyoming in week 1 and then couldn't get it done across the finish line against Oregon, ran his injury-prone quarterback too much, got him hurt, and now their season appears to be a little bit shaky, close to coming off the rails. You had the whole Brett Yormark in Lubbock thing, and as much as I thought that was such a ridiculous thing for Texas fans to get mad about, it doesn't look great then when, again, Tech is 2-3 with a loss to Wyoming in their back pocket after the way that they've started the year, and Texas has a double-digit win at Alabama. So it has not been good at all. And if this were reversed, if the roles were reversed and it was, hey, this has been Texas and Oklahoma struggling all of a sudden after years of dominance, they would get that benefit of the doubt. They would get the narrative benefit of the doubt. The Big 12 does not. The rest of the league does not. And as a K-State fan, somebody who covers K-State and is as involved in it as almost anybody, I saw it firsthand with the way K-State didn't get any benefit of the doubt for losing on the road at an SEC school on the longest field goal in SEC history. A 3-point loss at Mizzou on the longest field goal in SEC history dropped K-State from 15 to out of the poll. And they just briefly, they were in at 25 in one of the 2 polls last week and then didn't play and fell out. So there's just no margin for error or benefit of the doubt for this league. And I'm just saying you kind of have to be ready for that treatment here if this is going to continue to roll the way that it is with Texas and Oklahoma looking like they're likely to be headed to the Big 12 championship game and playing a rematch after their showdown this weekend. I guess the other side of that too, that I could say, hey, schools will get the benefit of the doubt. You look at LSU right now. LSU's 3-2. They just gave up 50-plus points last week to Lane Kiffin, who couldn't score to save his life against Alabama the week before, and LSU is still ranked at 3-2. That's your SEC big brand bump. They get the SEC big brand bump there, and they stay ranked. K-State, meanwhile, goes on the road as the number 15 team in the country and loses on a 61-yard field goal and drops 10-plus spots out of the top 25. So I guess the last point on this, the last thing I would say, again, coming from more of a K-State centric perspective here, feels like there is an awful lot of pressure on the Wildcats to get it together, maintain things. And I think there's a case to be made that could happen and that they could really challenge here. But there are enough question marks that I've seen so far this year to be dubious about that. Absolutely. And when I talk about, hey, everybody's kind of dropped the ball here, K-State losing at Mizzou, that was dropping the ball. They had multiple opportunities to put that game away in the fourth quarter when they were up by a possession. Didn't do it, got burned, got beat. And that is hurting because if K-State won that game, they'd probably be like 12-13, something like that in the country right now. And that would you would still feel like you had more of a fighting chance there. Unfortunately, that has not been the case. And look, I guess West Virginia deserves to be in this conversation at 4-1. I also still have my doubts about that propelling itself throughout the entire season of a team that can go like 10-2 and make the Big 12 championship game. But if they could, I would love for it to happen. So they get mentioned. But outside of that, I don't know anybody bringing up anybody else in this league as like a legit possibility to get there and do any damage and try to reverse this whole narrative from happening. I'm just not seeing it. And another part of this is like K-State does not get the sun-kissed Oklahoma schedule on the way out the door. K-State's got to go to Austin. So that's a pretty tough putt. And Texas just got Kansas out of the way, who I still think that they're the fourth best team in the league. Texas just got them out of the way with a 40-14 blitzkrieg, with whatever the hell is going on with Jalen Daniels, which seems to have gotten even a little bit more weird and kind of sketchy as to what exactly his status is and what is going on behind closed doors there in Lawrence this week. It just, that hurts Kansas's candidacy to make any kind of a serious run here. So it's not great, guys. I'll be honest with you. It does not feel great right now for what this is going to do for the narrative of the league. And I also think this can be traced back in part to what happened in the national championship game. There was so much positive momentum rolling when K-State and TCU make it to the Big 12 championship game. You have this great knockdown, drag out, overtime title game. TCU still makes it into the playoff. TCU beats the Big Ten champion Michigan, who, by the way, people are just loving up now. People love them some Michigan. They lost last year to TCU in the Fiesta Bowl. That is a thing that happened. But nobody remembers. They remember, God, what was the final of the national championship game? Someone give that to me in the chat. Was it like 65-7? That's what they remember. And the narrative started going downhill with that. TCU bookended that by losing their first game of the season to Colorado in the first real big game that everybody was watching. And it's just been all downhill from there. So it's not great. It's not great right now, guys. It is not great. But I welcome your thoughts on the situation. I forgot I did have this little Bruce Feldman piece that I was going to tack onto this. I'll get to some of the super chats here before I do that, but it's just kind of a nice little tag onto this story about where Texas is actually at right now and paying some respect to the Longhorns. It was anonymous quotes gathered from coaches and analysts on Big 12 teams who have already played Texas this year and what they have to say. So they beat people from Baylor or Kansas if you're keeping track at home, but what they have to say about the Longhorns roster. And again, it makes it feel pretty daunting for anybody to try and actually legitimately knock them off by the time they get to Arlington. So Payson Cougar fan. What's up, Payson Cougar fan? Appreciate you being here. Thank you for your support of the channel as always. And by the way, if you want to be like Payson Cougar fan and get your chat, your thoughts onto the show tonight with almost 200 people in here, click the $ below the chat box to make it a super chat, attach a donation. It will pin it in a separate column for me. Ensures that your question or comment gets read here on the show tonight and supports the work that I'm doing on the channel to bring you Big 12-centric content from the world of college football, college basketball, and conference realignment. It's all much appreciated. I couldn't do it without your help. I'll even throw this out there. I bought a mixer and a new mic. So it's here. I just have not had time yet to actually unbox it and get everything set up. But that should, knock on wood, be rolling for Sunday. So we're upgrading around here, folks. Your support helps, and it's going to get you better audio quality for all the audio files out there, of which I've definitely had some who have requested it. So we're making moves here, but your support very much helps that. So click the $ below the chat box in order to do that. Payson Cougar fan says the Holy War rivalry will help the Big 12 moving forward in 2024. It will, and I think Utah is going to be a big boost. I know here in this moment with Utah's loss last week and still the quarterback injury issues, it's not Utah at its total peak, but I have a lot of confidence that by the end of the year, they're still going to be right there in the Pac-12 race and be a really salty team, and year in, year out, continue to be a really salty team. And I like BYU quite a bit. I said I think Kansas is the fourth best team in the league. I had to do on our Patreon channel, patreon.com/3mod, by the way, if you'd like to join that, for the 3mod podcast that I do. We were power ranking the Big 12. I actually put BYU fourth this week, simply because I don't know what's going on with Jalen Daniels in Kansas. And I think Jason Bean is still a very effective quarterback when he gets an actual week of practice to perform and get ready. I think he kind of struggles in the clutch, but I think they can definitely still win 8 games with him. But with that uncertainty going on, I stuck BYU at 4. Point is, I'm high on the Cougars. I think long term they will be a very solid program in the league, and that rivalry will definitely be a nice feather in the cap for the league. It's crazy the more I think about it, and because I was about to say, but I don't think it will have the sort of draw that like a Coach Prime at Colorado will if he is here. You talk about like things that put a lot of pressure on the league right now, like maintaining Coach Prime in Boulder is something that I think should have you feeling a little bit of pressure if you're the Big 12 right now. Like you got to keep this guy around, man. That could be a massive swing next year if he's going to be gone and Colorado's just going and making like your average higher. Like I don't even know where you go next after that if Coach Prime is gone. Are you going back to like I guess maybe it's a Sean Lewis who's already there, who was the Kent State head coach, who's his OC right now, something like that. But that is not going to pop nearly the way that a Coach Prime would. But that could really help smooth things over and continue to drive attention there. And I think he will get even more talent and continue to build up a better roster here this offseason. So, yes, things like having the Holy War will help, but definitely are going to need others to pull their weight and hold up their end of the bargain there. So, and as one thing that I will give Texas and Oklahoma fans a little bit of credit for this. One thing they've been saying for a while is like, hey, what happens when you do not have Texas or Oklahoma in the league to be beating and to earn credibility that way? So again, that'll come down to not having a complete dog bleep non-conference portion of the schedule, which is what the Big 12 had this year. I mean, we can just call it that. That's what it was. Les, what's up, Les? Les, thank you for your support. Appreciate you being here on the chat tonight. Thank you for popping in. Les asks, is West Virginia a mirage? Wild to see them do well. I mean, so here's a part of the deal with West Virginia is that the rest of their schedule makes me think it's not really fair to call this just a mirage or a fluke or something like that, because Pitt I think is terrible, but Texas Tech and TCU, those are wins the caliber of like Houston, Oklahoma State, UCF, BYU, Cincy, Baylor. Outside of their game at Oklahoma, that's the rest of the schedule. And if you can beat Texas Tech and win at TCU, there's no reason you can't beat Houston, Oklahoma State, UCF, BYU, Cincy, or Baylor. All pretty in line there with what you got. Now, being able to do that repeatedly and get to the Big 12 championship game, that I think is another story. And I don't think that West Virginia has the horses to do that game after game the rest of the year. I don't think it's a total mirage. I think they're a pretty tough, gritty team. They certainly get that personality from their starting quarterback when he's out there, but even when he wasn't, they found a way to win. They've got a good defense. We know they've got a pretty talented running back for sure in CJ Donaldson. I don't think it's fair to call it a mirage. I think they've just been pretty solid and less destructive, less self-destructive than TCU and Texas Tech so far this year. And in the Big 12, quite honestly, right now this year, if you want to finish top 4, top 5 in the league, basically all you have to do is not be a disaster. Just don't be a total self-imploding disaster a month plus into the season, and that's going to put you in that category. And so that's where they are right now. So no, I wouldn't call it a mirage, but I do have my doubts that this is some kind of like 10-2 season. I think West Virginia feels pretty 8-4-ish to me. West Virginia feels very 8-4-ish to me right now, which is a hell of an accomplishment. And Neil Brown should keep his job for that, and that he should be commended for it. But a lot of it has just been not steering off the road, like just keeping the steering wheel forward instead of veering off the road into a ditch, which is what a lot of the rest of the league has done so far this year. MJ Allen, what's up, MJ Allen? Appreciate you being here, MJ Allen. Here we go. I think MJ Allen's a Texas fan, if I'm recalling that correctly. Hey, you deserve a little victory lap right now, MJ Allen. Sometimes we got to stand up and be a man and take some L's. Right now is that time. MJ Allen says, remember that the road to the Big 12 championship goes through Lubbock, per Joey McGuire. Texas can't win the Big 12 then because they do not travel to Lubbock. Whew, MJ, you get some ha-has here, man. You do. Like, this is a part of it. I like Joey Maguire. I like the bravado that he brings, but it can backfire on you if you have a year like this. And unfortunately, Texas Tech has been having a year like this so far. Now, I would also caution you a little bit, MJ Allen, that Texas teams with a lot of talent have lost to lesser teams than Texas Tech this year. See Kansas 2 years ago. That has happened. So you got it. And that was in Austin. So be careful. That has still been the MO of your program for a decade and a half. But yes, right now you certainly look to be in a position to take some shots and laugh a little bit. I won't stop it. I won't stop it. And that's not just because you generously decided to support the channel here tonight. That is not the only reason that I won't stop that right now. So MJ Allen, tip of the cap. That's all I got to say to you right now. Everybody else has to step up their game. You know, I know the rest of the league. I know all the coaches have this waiting for them on their desk in the morning after we do the live show, and they listen closely to every word that I have to say. They're hanging on every word, and so they're going to be inspired and motivated by me telling them that they all need to get it together. But that's what I'm saying. Everybody else needs to get this together. If we're going to do anything about a Texas and Oklahoma potentially damaging Big 12 championship game. But MJ, best of luck to you guys this weekend against Oklahoma. I'm actually almost of the mind that it would be better for everybody else in the league if Texas were to win this weekend, because it feels to me like Texas is just probably too good to not make the Big 12 championship game. Oklahoma, I still think, is flawed enough that they could drop another game somewhere else along the way. And if your hope is like K-State or West Virginia only trips up once throughout the rest of their Big 12 schedule, and you could get Oklahoma one of those conference losses now and then have them get tripped up by somebody else the rest of the way, that seems to me to be probably a more palatable way to go than have Oklahoma win this game and then waltz through the rest of their schedule. Where was that? I had the Oklahoma schedule plotted out somewhere. Oklahoma's got UCF, Kansas, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, BYU, TCU. I mean, Kansas is probably capable of beating them. West Virginia, like maybe. BYU, maybe. I'm not seeing it from the other three right now. UCF, Oklahoma State, TCU. So, I almost think for that reason, because of the kiss that Oklahoma got with the schedule, you'd almost rather see them just go ahead and take an L and then hope somebody else can get them the rest of the way as opposed to Texas. But I don't know. Honestly, with that one, I won't be too stressed one way or the other in terms of a rooting interest. I will just be kicking back like everybody else to watch a great football game this weekend. Alan, what's up, Alan? Appreciate you being here as always, my friend. Thank you for your support of the channel. Alan says, John would hate to see Texas win the Big 12, but taking the longer view will be okay. With Brett Yormark, the new Big 12 with its 16 teams is ascending, and the SEC's best days are behind them. Whoo, Alan, bringing it hot. Hey, I appreciate it, Alan. Look, the Big 12 will be okay. Yes, the Big 12 will be okay. This is not like, hey, the conference is going to collapse or anything like that. It's just, we know how hard it is to fight for respect for this league. Like, all of us who have been out here talking about it for 2 years and in the Twitter sphere for 2 years know just how damn infuriating some of the noise can be from other people who don't respect the conference and don't take it seriously. So it is, you start looking at that and thinking about what the next couple of years could look like when Texas and OU are gone and we're really moving into this full-fledged Power 2 world, because the Pac-12 will be gone too. It's going to look a lot different next year. I worry about how quickly you could kind of get buried based on the narrative that has been going throughout this conference ever since TCU got just walloped in the national championship game. I mean, SEC's best days behind them. I hope you're right. That'd be great, but I do have my doubts on that. Now, they are not having a good year this year. Do not mistake that. There's I don't even think it's fair to say mediocre quarterback play going on in that conference right now. Like, who's your best quarterback in the SEC? I guess it's Jaden Daniels, but he's 3-2 right now. After that, maybe like Jackson Dart. I mean, I don't know. It's not great quarterback play going on in the SEC right now. So it's not been a great year. They've lost a lot of non-conference games, but they've lost a lot of non-conference games to Power 5 teams. Okay, like regardless of how you it's been 2 Power 5 teams, not just South Alabama and Texas State. So it's still been a little bit different for the SEC as far as that goes. So they're not this big, bad, crazy, unbeatable force this year, no doubt. As a league, they are more mortal. But I don't know that that's going to be a long-term downward trend with them. I would love for you to be right, though, Alan. I would absolutely love for you to be right, and I appreciate you popping in here with your thoughts, and I appreciate you being an ardent supporter here of this channel. To put a capper on the Texas discussion here is Bruce Feldman from The Athletic. He wrote a little piece today, and I thought it was pretty well done. Because not only did he give you these anonymous quotes that I'm about to read from coaches who have faced Texas already, but the premise of the article, he was like, look, I'm not going to say Texas is back, but I will say Texas is different. And I think that is fair. Like, Texas clearly is different this year. To me, a big part of it is what they're doing in the trenches. Like, it feels like they've always had skill talent, but they've been kind of soft, been pushed around, not focused. Now, there's still been a lot of moments of the focus lacking against Wyoming and Kansas, but they seem much tougher in the trenches and being able to push people around and enforce their will. And that, to me, is something that we haven't really seen. So fair to call them different, but we've learned our lesson, apparently, or at least Bruce Feldman has, about calling them back, like full-fledged back. So here's one quote. It says, quote, "That is a very impressive roster," said one longtime SEC coach. "They got linemen like Alabama used to have, both sides of the ball. They beat the bleep out of Alabama. They push everybody around. They did whatever they wanted with Baylor. They've got speed outside, and their tight end is a freak." Goes on to say, "I think Sark has learned his lesson. He's running the ball. He's required toughness. He used to be next play, hurry up. He's learned what it takes. He hired great coaches. Bo Davis is a great defensive line coach. Kyle Flood is a great O-line coach. It shows what those guys have done there." All focused on the line, right? You notice that. All focused on the line. And what was the big narrative about Sark last year was that, hey, he didn't run the ball enough. And it's very true. I mean, that game in Stillwater, if he would not have had Quinn Ewers throwing the ball 50 times, I think they'd probably win. But instead, he got locked into getting away from Bijan Robinson, which was just otherworldly crazy. And then you look at what Oklahoma State was at the end of the year, what they are this year, and you're like, how did that Texas team lose? So there's a little bit of hope. If you want a little bit of hope about what could happen the rest of the year, that Oklahoma State team wound up being pretty bad by the end of the season. And they did get Texas last year. Here's another quote. "Their defense is dominant, and their D-line is one of the most impressive groups I've ever seen." This is per a Big 12 analyst whose team faced Texas this year. Number 93, which is Tavondre Sweat, who is 362 pounds. Number 93 was incredible to watch in person. Their D-line is freakish, said another Big 12 coach. They're getting a huge pass rush with 4. Their front 7 is a lot better than last year. The freshman linebacker is super fast. He's so hard to block coming off the edge. They made Alabama look bad. People blame that quarterback, but they didn't have a lot of guys open. One more here, just for good measure. Their O-line is so big and physical, and they move people, said the Big 12 analyst. Both of their tackles have elite movement skills. I also thought their left guard was pretty damn good. I think their O-line is the strength of their offense. Their receivers can run and are as good as advertised. Their backs break tackles and are great in space. And then the last one here, Sark is the best play caller I've ever faced. He hardly had any tendencies going in, and if he did, he broke them during our game. He really keeps you off balance. They have a great chance. I think that's supposed to be chance. They have a great chance to make a deep run. That's your analysis from coaches and analysts who have faced Texas already this year. So again, makes it feel like a pretty daunting task to keep those guys from getting to the Big 12 championship game this year. We'll see how it plays out, but I felt like it was a pretty appropriate time to have this conversation and give some kudos to Texas, like credit where it's due. Credit where it's due. They have stepped up so far this year. Like I said the other day, I feel like I am still maybe a little more cautious than some on jumping all the way in on like Texas's national championship caliber here, just because they still do have this tendency to play with their food, and we've seen it with Wyoming and Kansas. But even if they do that, they can absolutely withstand one loss and still make the playoff. You kidding me? Texas, the brand of Texas, with a win at Bryant-Denny Stadium, beating Nick Saban this year, yeah, they'll be fine with one loss. They might be fine with 2 losses to get into the college football playoff. So they will absolutely have every opportunity there as far as that goes. All right, so the Clemson-Florida State thing continues, right? Clemson-Florida State thing. I forgot I have my little banners today. Your Clemson and Florida State update here. Last week on the channel has been focused pretty heavily on Clemson and Florida State and what came out in a couple of different articles. One from the Post and Courier in Charleston, South Carolina, Gene Sapikoff of the Post and Courier reported that Clemson administrators were in talks with both the SEC and Big Ten. We also had this, and this was something I didn't get to. It's Larry Williams of Tigers Illustrated. So he runs one of the big Clemson fan sites. And on the heels of that Post and Courier story, he tweeted, subscribers to TigersIllustrated.com know that since mid-August, we have written that the attempted secession from the ACC union is likely to commence during the 2023 season. And 3 days ago, we wrote that it's likely to happen in October. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you want to peek over at your calendar right now and see what the date is, but we are in October. Mine happens to say October 4th. So we're in the month where now you have basically 2 people on the Clemson side of things telling you that Clemson is going to make its jump now. And the Post and Courier article was a lot about strength in numbers. So you'd have to imagine that Florida State and North Carolina would probably be a part of that. I had forgotten until I read this article from the Florida State SB Nation site that North Carolina put out a pretty fervent, not denial, but they a very strongly worded statement about how unhappy they were about the expansion in the ACC. They didn't love the idea of adding Stanford, Cal, and SMU. And you know that they are as coveted as anybody left on the realignment landscape this side of Notre Dame. They might be the most coveted outside of Notre Dame that's left. So you could potentially have the ACC still explode during football season, according to what we're hearing out of Clemson. And I know it's easy to brush some of that off as rumor, and it's hard to know in realignment, 1, if things will actually come to fruition, and 2, who's telling the truth, who's not. But those are 2 sources. The fan sites do get a lot of info these days generally. Now you got to be careful with it, but you've got that plus a legitimate newspaper that also covers the school. So it's two. There's a lot of smoke. There's a lot of smoke, right? And it follows a ton of smoke that happened this summer about the Magnificent Seven and trying to get out of the grant of rights and everything that's been going on here. So I do take it as a somewhat legitimate threat here, a somewhat credible threat. So let me just read you a little bit more from this article. It says there is too much smoke for there not to be fire behind the scenes. Credible reports of the four corner schools speaking with the Big 12 started almost a year before the Pac-12 exodus. So the point that they're making here is like, hey, it took a while after there were credible reports of the four corner schools talking to the Big 12 for the deal actually to get done, for things to get figured out, for I's to be dotted, T's to be crossed, everything to fall into place. Florida State and Clemson realize that staying in the ACC until 2036 will be a death by 1,000 cuts while their rivals get an extra $30 million in TV revenue per year. Sapikoff mentions Clemson preferred destination would be the SEC rather than the Big Ten. There has been some pushback in SEC circles thanks to Greg Sankey's remarks regarding the league being happy at 16 members. But as the Big Ten proved with their gutting of the Pac-12, leagues are going to deny anything regarding expansion until the moment invites are extended. In addition, there's a tired adage that Florida State or Clemson wouldn't be on the SEC's radar for expansion due to Florida and South Carolina already being league members. This I did think was an interesting point because it's something I've mentioned a lot because to me it doesn't make as much sense as the Big Ten would there. I still think getting into states where a league is not in still has a pretty big advantage. It's very advantageous. It's more advantageous for the Big Ten, I would say, to add those schools and get into those states than it would be the SEC. But fair point here that the article says, well, Florida State doesn't add any new markets to the SEC's footprint. The thought process behind expansion is changing. With ESPN shifting toward a direct-to-consumer model, actual eyeballs watching the product will be the key metric going forward. So they're just saying, look, if you're adding another huge fan base and a team in which, as you can imagine, this is a Florida State publication, we got a lot of numbers about TV viewership, and Florida State feels very strongly about that. They claim that 12 of the 17 games since 2012 in the ACC that have had over 5 million viewers have involved Florida State. So they're saying, look, people watch Florida State. You want those eyeballs. It doesn't matter if you're already in the state or not. It would be appealing to the SEC. And maybe so. But I do wonder if that would be something you would get more of a push from the Big Ten for if push really came to shove when it came down to it. But interesting thought there from Florida State. And it would seem like based on that, they probably prefer the SEC, which I get. You know, regionally, that makes a lot more sense than going to the Big Ten. So let me slip in a couple of reminders here before we finish off that thought. And that may be about all I have time to get to here tonight. I can give you the Pac-12 updates and a little standalone content later this week. But if you got something you want to get in here in the last 5 to 10 minutes of the show, now is the time. Click the $sign below the chat box. That is how you can attach a super chat, make it a super chat, attach a donation to your chat to not only support the work that I'm doing to bring you Big 12-centric content in the conference realignment, college football, and college basketball world here on this channel week in, week out, but it's also a way to make your voice heard with over 200 people here in the chat. That is how you can get on tonight, is by clicking the $sign below that chat box. If you could like the video, that also really helps as well. Totally free way to support the channel. Leaving a comment in the comment section also really helps. Good old comment section underneath the video, whether you love me or hate me, all of that is great. You can do it right now. You don't have to wait until the end of the video or the end of the live stream. All that is very, very helpful, and I do much appreciate it. And of course, if you're not watching live, it is John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo as well to support the channel there. One last point that this article made on the Florida State situation. It says how exactly Clemson, Florida State, or North Carolina plan on dealing with the ACC exit fee or grant of rights is still unclear. The new public details of Texas and Oklahoma's divorce from the Big 12 may provide a roadmap. The move to the SEC will cost Texas and Oklahoma roughly half of what was believed, with most of the money coming from distributions withheld by the Big 12 rather than any upfront payments by the schools. ESPN will also provide transitional payments directly to Texas and Oklahoma. And per Kansas State Athletic Director Gene Taylor, there was significant pushback from other schools to fully enforce the bylaws and grant of rights. But the Big 12's lawyers advised the conference that the bylaws were not as rock solid as everybody thought, and they could be tied up in lawsuits forever. And that advice prompted the other schools to vote for the agreement that allowed Texas and Oklahoma to leave the Big 12 a year early. Should also be noted that the Big 12's cost-benefit analysis to pursue things in court with only 1 year to go on their current grant of rights agreement is a far cry from the ACC enforcing an additional 13 years, which fair. Very fair. Big 12's in a different scenario when it's just 1 year. If you got 13 years left with these guys like the ACC does, you might be a little bit more inclined to try to fight the power here. But it does say, however, Clemson, Florida State, and North Carolina have to feel emboldened by the relatively low cost it took for Oklahoma and Texas to break free of the Big 12. And that's a pretty interesting angle. That is a pretty interesting angle on what has happened there and how the Big 12 – at one point, the Big 12 was being held up as this. Remember, it was not that long ago. I'm old enough to remember the Big 12 being held up as this bastion of, was it the grant of rights? I think it was the grant of rights as opposed to the bylaws. The Big 12 had this crazy strong ironclad grant of rights that the ACC copied off of. They copied the homework of the Big 12 of that years ago. And it was written, I think, by Dennis Dodd at one point. That was one of the big things holding that in place. It was so strongly done. It was so well done. From like a legality standpoint, that it was going to prevent anything crazy from happening in the ACC. And now it's sitting here being held up, the Big 12 as an example of being like, well, look, they kind of let Texas and Oklahoma off the hook pretty easy here. So maybe that's actually what could happen in the ACC. And this is going to spur the ACC thing to happen, the ACC explosion to happen here. So it's just funny how that all comes back around. Anyway, that's basically your update on Florida State and Clemson, but it does seem like now we're getting fairly regular updates there, and the smoke continues to build down in South Carolina and down in Florida. So you will definitely need to be looking out for that apparently the rest of this month. I'll be honest, I don't know if I can handle the ACC exploding in the middle of football season. If they could wait until January, that'd be awesome. The ACC exploding in the middle of football season with us just now recovering from all the carnage this summer Feels like an awful lot, but I mean, that we'll be covering it here on the channel, no matter what it is that happens. Scrolling down through my notes, did you guys see today? John Rothstein, college hoops extraordinaire, put out there today that the Big 12 is discussing playing 20 league games during the 2024-25 season. Multiple sources told College Hoops today. No timetable on an official announcement. Of course, they're playing 18 right now, but Big 12 basketball fans could get 20 games of conference play. Honestly, that to me starts to make sense. Like, it's hard scheduling good teams to come play in your gym in the non-conference these days. Like, everybody just wants to do neutral court games and not actually bring in nice home schedules. If it's harder to create some of those matchups for TV in the non-con, we'll just cut 2 non-con games that would be played against directional state U and instead add 2 more conference games with the best college basketball inventory in the country, and bada bing, bada boom. That seems like kind of a no-brainer sort of move to me. Another thing to add value, if you're thinking about decoupling basketball rights eventually, that's another thing that seemingly could really help with that. So I thought that idea was like, oh yeah, I mean, of course, milk as much as you can out of that great basketball product that you do actually have. So one tiny little note there. For my Pac-12 fans, I'm sorry, continue to just blow right past these Pac-12 updates. Again, I will try to go through some of that in a standalone video before I talk to you next time in a live format on Sunday, but I think I might cut it off a little bit early here tonight since we got a bit of a late start and shut her down. But I appreciate everybody for hanging out here tonight. Couple of reminders: as you exit, as you file out, please do so in an orderly fashion. But please click the like button on your way out the door if you have not yet. That helps me with the YouTube algorithm and is a totally free way to support the channel. If you feel so inclined, you can also contribute to the channel and help support me at John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you would like to do that, that is much appreciated as always. Tell a friend about this. Word of mouth helps. Also spreading it on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, whatever it is that you're using. Let your friends and family know about this channel if they are Big 12 fans, if they're college football fans, if they are fans of your school. Let them know, and let's continue to grow this channel as much as we possibly can. All right. I think that is about it. Wow, we got a Mizzou fan in here. All right. Hey, Mizzou, go get it done. Beat LSU this weekend. I'm with you, Dakota. Go beat LSU this weekend. All right. Thank you guys for being here. Take care. Appreciate each and every one of you, and I will talk to you soon.